At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
Some days you just want to amplify your everyday look. Like when you want the look of false lashes without the extra effort, reach for Thrive Cosmetics Liquid Lash Volumizer Mascara. Or when you want all eyes on your smile, keep Empower Gloss Ultra Glossy Lip Serum in your bag. It's a burst of 24-hour hydration that smooths like a serum, shines like a gloss, and can be worn sheer or layered. You'll always look and feel your best with Thrive Cosmetics. Plus, every product is 100% vegan, cruelty-free, and made with clean, skin-loving ingredients that work with your skin, not against it. Amplify your everyday. Go to thrivecosmetics.com/shine26 for an exclusive offer of 20% off your first order. That's Thrive Cosmetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/shine26.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Primal Potential Podcast. I am Elizabeth Benton. Thanks so much for joining me. Before we get into today's episode, a lot of you guys have been reaching out, loving, sharing the 10-part vault series of the podcast that we did. And it took me a little bit longer than I wanted to get this together for you, but I have a companion guide for you. It's totally free. I thought about charging for it, decided against it. If you go to primalpotential.com/vault, you will see all 10 of the episodes there, but more importantly, you will see an option to opt in to get this free companion guide. Essentially, I put together transcripts for each of the 10 episodes, and then I just pulled out the most important parts, the highlights, what you're going to want to remember, revisit, save, bookmark, go back to, copy, paste, whatever you want to do. So you can go to primalpotential.com/vault. You will see all 10 episodes listed there. You can listen to them right from my site if you want. You can access them easily, see them all in one spot. But more importantly, you can download that free vault. Well, download's not the right word. You can get access to the free companion guide right by the opt-in button. You just share your name and email and you'll get access to it right away. So I hope that you love that. Let folks know that that is available just by going to primalpotential.com/vault, VAULT. Today, we are continuing our 4-part series on this idea of defense. And this has been a highly requested episode because it's all about when it's not working. The moment when you say, all right, I know what to do, I've heard you, and either it's not working for me or I'm not doing it, or sometimes the most honest version is I didn't want to do it. I know the tools, I have the tools, I get the tools, I didn't want to use them. So what do I do then? Because that's a common moment where people quit, get frustrated, think that it's never going to work for them. And what I want to cover today is the fact that more often than not, when we say it's not working, there are a few common culprits that if we lean into those and optimize those, you'll start to see that the very tools that weren't working now suddenly worked. Let's talk about the first of the common culprits here, and that is you let one frustrating moment decide the next one. And this is the way it happened for me the other day. I noticed I was trying to get some customer service help. You know, that can be a very frustrating experience. And not surprisingly, I was dealing with a chat bot, and I let that irritation ripple over into other decisions, specifically the way I talk to my husband, the way I talk to my son. And that is such a common reason that we feel like the tools don't work. It's because we're unknowingly carrying frustration from one moment into the next moment when we have the opportunity to lower the emotional temperature, right? And if we don't use that moment of awareness to lower the emotional temperature before we go on to our next decision, then the frustration from one moment bleeds into the next one. And maybe it's not frustration. Maybe it's the anger. Maybe it's the sadness. Maybe it's the stress or the overwhelm. And maybe it's not customer service. Maybe it's dinner didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, or you got in a fight with somebody at work, or you got a really high unexpected bill in the mail. And now you're saying, I don't even care. It doesn't matter. Nothing dramatic happened. You just moved forward without an intentional reset without realizing, oh, if I don't bring this down, then it's going to have a ripple effect. And all of a sudden, one crappy moment turns into a second, turns into a third, turns into a fourth, and it didn't have to be that way. Here's another common culprit. We overstate the problem, usually not fully consciously, so we can justify a reward, a compensation, or a payoff. When we say things like, today was an absolute nightmare, I'm so done, I don't even care anymore. Okay, what actually happened? Most of us have a real pattern of overstating the problem, and then we feel really justified in some type of compensation that we deserve it because it's been so bad. But it actually wasn't so bad in the scheme of things. It was just inconvenient, or it took longer than we expected, or somebody was annoying. Oh my gosh, guess what? That's going to happen all the time. Might have been uncomfortable, might have been annoying, but it certainly wasn't catastrophic or day changing, but we just grabbed that and now we feel justified in skipping the workout or having the glass of wine or whatever it is. When we inflate the story, we inflate the permission. I think I was talking to you guys about this in one of the last episodes. Maybe it was on a webinar, but I was talking about how after a bad day of work, if I just decide like today sucked, I just want to go make cookies with my kids and just eat the cookie dough and order pizza and I don't even care. Well, that feels justified when I tell myself that the day was a nightmare. But if I actually slow down, the truth is probably the day wasn't even close to a nightmare. It was just annoying and it was inconvenient. Maybe it didn't go according to plan. But it was in no way a disaster. And we can't continue to confuse how intense something feels with how serious it actually is. Because if we operate that way, always confusing how intense it feels with how serious it is, then we're always deserving of some kind of escape or reward. And this distinction matters because intensity justifies permission. So if we practice getting really honest, everything gets easier. I'll tell you a silly example, but it's silly because I imagine a lot of you guys can relate to it. It's one of those things that in the scheme of things is not a big deal, but we can convince ourselves otherwise. So I had this annoying tech situation and I don't like tech stuff. I'm not a tech person despite having an internet business, and it was really frustrating me. I had just gotten the girls down and then my husband and my son came home from jujitsu and I'm right in the middle of like a tech issue and I don't really know how to fix it. And my son, my husband tells my son they got to go to bed and he starts kind of fussing like, Mom, I want you to put me to bed. And I looked at my husband and I was like, I'm in the middle of like a work crisis. No, I wasn't. I've had crises before. This was nowhere in the vicinity of crisis. It was just an annoyance. It was a frustration. I was having to migrate my site from one hosting platform to another. It's definitely annoying. It's not something that I do on a regular basis. In fact, it's probably the first time I've ever done it myself. But it was one of those things where, hey, if you give me 10 minutes, buddy, I can be at a point where I can pause this and I'd love to put you to bed. But if I let that intensity of the feeling create permission to either snap at my husband or snap at my son or just confuse my priorities. That's how it often shakes out. Not because we, drown ourselves in cookie dough and wine, but because we allow it to just blur our priorities. This over exaggeration of the moment. And I see it all the time in my clients. Now, another common culprit is that sometimes the tools don't work because you didn't want them to. You absolutely could have paused. You could have tried another perspective. You had 5 minutes to work out, even though you didn't have the 30 minutes you hoped you would have. But if you use the tool, then you interrupt the escape. And what you really wanted in that moment was an escape. If you use the tool, you lose the excuse that is making you feel okay about the escape. And then you say like, see, it didn't work for me. But you never really let it. And a big part of why we never really let it is because we're not super honest about how the escape really feels. So I used sugar as an escape for a really long time. And the reason that it kept its hold on me for so long is because it took me a very long time to get honest about the pattern. And the truth is that, yeah, there was a few minutes of pleasure, of dopamine, of this is good, and I'm giving myself something that I want, but that was like 10% of the experience, and 90% of the experience was shitty, awful. 10% of the experience was like, I'm anticipating it and it tastes good and I'm getting what I want. That was 10%. But the other 90% was, now I'm tired. Now I'm frustrated. Now I'm discouraged. Now I'm beating myself up. Now I'm not sleeping as well. Now I'm more tired the next day. Now I have more cravings the next day. But I was only selling myself on the 10%, and I was selling the 10% hard while totally ignoring the reality of the 90%. And more often than not, that's true, whether we're talking about scrolling too much or watching too much TV or spending too much money. You know what? Yeah, the 10% of overspending does feel really good, but we need to be honest about the 90% of the experience of overspending that feels really bad. Yeah, there's 10% of hitting snooze that feels really good, and there's 90% of hitting snooze that doesn't. That makes our day more stressful, that starts out our day feeling disappointed in ourselves, or like we didn't follow through and we didn't keep our word, and now we're not starting the day the way we could have started our day. Right? So here's what I want you to look at. If you're saying it's not working for me, I'm not doing the work, did you carry emotion from one moment into the next when you didn't have to? Did you exaggerate a problem or frustration kind of so you could justify the payoff? Did you avoid a tool because you didn't want to be interrupted? And did you sell yourself on 10% of an experience without being honest about the other 90%? Because in a lot of situations, that's where the struggle lives. Now, I will also say this. You might be like, nope, those things aren't me. And that's one of the reasons I think it is so critically important that we have coaches and mentors. And it doesn't have to be me. Look, you already know if you jive with my style or you don't. But how often are we just going to go on doing the same things we've been doing that make us really profoundly discouraged or unhappy, and not inviting in a fresh perspective or a fresh approach? That's why doing this alone feels so hard. In the moment, your version always feels justified. It always feels acceptable in that circumstance or different. Your frustration feels bigger. Your circumstances feel more unique. Your exception feels reasonable. But these moments where we give ourselves a pass, where we don't do the work, where we make these critical distinctions, these critical decisions that shape our life and our progress, it's everything. I don't think you need more information. Some of you might. I would say 99.5% of you don't need more information. You need better reps inside those seconds where you normally talk yourself out of doing the thing you said mattered. You said you would do this time. And that's what Defense Foundations is all about. So hopefully you see at least a little of yourself in these common culprits. These are the things that we dive into in a more personal level, in a more like unique to you kind of scenario inside Defense Foundations. We start on March 1st, which is like basically in a minute. I'm going to put the link to register in the show description. If you have questions about it, email me, elizabeth@primalpotential.com. I would love the opportunity to work with you, but mostly I want you to commit to something that is different. If there's something you want to hear about for part 5, I've already got some ideas, but hearing your feedback and your questions is awesome for shaping where we go with this. And even if it isn't part 5, we can do a follow-up Q&A. So I would love to hear your thoughts, your questions, where you want this conversation to go next. Shoot me an email, elizabeth@primalpotential.com. And I hope I get to work with you for the month of March in Defense Foundations. I'll put that link in the show description, and I'll see you on the next episode.